come. But I want to make sure I give full time to our speakers to be able to get all of the amazing information out that they're going to be giving us. So I will get started. Good evening, everyone. Let's get started. My name is Joe Uracy. I had put it in the chat. I graduated from NKU in 2017 and 2021. I am the president of the Young Alumni Council. Thank you for joining us today for the first virtual alumni professional development event. We have had some previous ones in person. Responding to our alumni's interest in professional development opportunities last fall, the Alumni Association began a quarterly series providing experts advice from NKU faculty, alumni on topics to help and advance your career. This evening, we're excited to continue this series with a discussion on how to have difficult conversations in the workplace. To help us navigate these tricky situations, we're pleased to have two expert speakers with us. Joining us once again is Dr. Sandra Spataro, and Dr. Spataro is a professor of management at NKU and holds a BA in economics and an MA in sociology from Stanford University. After graduating, Dr. Spataro went to the corporate world, before becoming a teacher. She earned her PhD in organizational behavior from the Haas School of Business. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Like my F1 team. The University of California, Berkeley in 2000. At the University of California, Berkeley in 2000. She taught at Yale and Cornell before coming to NKU. She has co-authored two books, Unstuck, A Tool for Yourself, Your Team, and Your World, and Dare to Inspire, Sustain the Fire of Inspiration in Work and Life. Joining Dr. Spataro is our alumni speaker, Jeff Weckbach. Jeff currently serves as the Township Administrator for Colerain Township, a community of 60,000 people plus, with an annual operating budget of $45 million. In his role, he oversees operations of the organization, including 300 plus employees spread across 5 departments: police, fire, development, administration, and public services. Jeff is a graduate from Northern Kentucky University and Northern Illinois University. He is an active member of ICMA and serves on their board of directors. Dr. Spataro and Jeff, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joey. I'm going to put the slides back up and continue us moving forward. So what we want for this evening is to not lecture at you for 90 minutes. So we'd like this to be interactive. So we're going to start right off with a question to you. What characterizes a conversation as difficult for you? How do we differentiate difficult conversations from not difficult conversations? What makes them difficult? You've pointed to a couple of things already in some of your expectations, which is great. But how would you characterize a conversation that you consider difficult to be that way?
Could be the context. If you're talking about something around, that may cause friction. In my world, it could be something like a cost increase, or even from a physical standpoint, if you're like in a one-on-one and you can sense body language that may be off-putting.
So you can tell that there are some emotions going on underneath what's happening or something like that. Yeah, Sharita, good. Beth, disciplinary action. Yeah, that's a really tough conversation to have. Good. And be safe, because you said you're driving. Just take care of yourself. Reflections on bad attitude, reactions, or behavior. Yeah. Hard things to ask for. Funds, support, more employees. Yeah. Trying to tell higher ups a program they bought doesn't do what they want it to do. But they're smarter because they're higher in the org chart. Come on now. Yeah, that's harder. It's harder. Agreed.
Managing change, or if there's uncertainty of the outcome or what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah. Because there again, Uncertainty is anxiety provoking. That's a very rational response to uncertainty. The emotions get in there, make it tough. Yeah, good. These are all really useful insights. We're going to borrow from the Crucial Conversations folks. Many of you know that series of Crucial Everythings. I really like with their work. They talk about difficult conversations having 3 key characteristics. One, it's high stakes, right? If we're just talking about where to pick up lunch today, and tomorrow we'll go somewhere else, it's not like a really big deal. That's not a terribly difficult conversation. But when you're talking about resources or new employees or a project isn't going right, disciplinary action, yeah, you guys hit it on the head. Those are high stakes conversations. Another thing that characterizes conversations as difficult is varying opinions. It's not hard to have a conversation about a high stakes thing if we all agree, right? It's like you said, Catherine, telling them their grand program that they launched doesn't do what they want it to do. They want it to work. You see that it doesn't. It's that gap between your views that makes the conversation difficult. Or I think I'm a star employee. You think I need discipline. Gap, right? And then the other piece that cranks up difficult emotions for us and can make them really hard to navigate is what we've already mentioned a couple of times, strong emotions. Emotions happen. We can't live in a world where emotions are not allowed to be at work because we're people and that's just not real. And so when emotions are part of what's going on, your emotional intelligence becomes more important, but it also brings up the difficulty of the conversation.
But I think to build on it a little bit too, sometimes you feel it in your gut before you walk into that room, before you have that conversation, based off of past experience, encounter, or just what it's going to be. You can sometimes build up in your mind, this is going to be a difficult conversation. And so now that we kind of have an idea of what a difficult conversation is, it's good for us to kind of think through what some examples might be. So we've listed a few out here, but again, to be interactive, throw some other ideas in the chat, times, conversations, things that you've had that are hard to work with coworkers. While you guys are, go ahead.
I
Yep.
have, yeah, I was just going to say I have one. I actually have a one-on-one tomorrow with one of my direct reports, and I don't think it's going to be super difficult, but slightly with this particular person because what I need to address is something I've addressed in the past, and I think it's going to lead to disciplinary action, just her performance, not completing all of her daily tasks. That's a concern. Another example I have, I had my monthly meeting with my team last week, and I felt ambushed. They're wanting to not go into the office. They're, for the most part, remote. They go in 1 day a week. There's work that needs to be done in that office. And that's going to be a difficult follow-up discussion with them because it's been a bone of contention. So that's going to be difficult to tell them they will have to continue to go into the office. As far as my one-on-one tomorrow, this person tends to push back and becomes a little cantankerous. So not really looking forward to that.
Anybody seen the cat?
Say it again. It looks like Sumi's phone. Maybe meant to be on mute.
But I think to maybe build on the point there, especially when it comes to employees, bad things are going to happen. Employees are going to make mistakes. But how you approach them and kind of how you direct the conversation is really going to determine what direction your organization winds up going. If you tolerate something or allow it to happen in the background, that can take your organization in one direction. And if you handle it tactfully and in the appropriate way, it can go in another. Sometimes these difficult conversations are a blessing, and you just don't know it until you get through it. And I'll share a quick example from my own work around terminations. I think that's probably one of the hardest ones that I've ever had to do is to terminate someone. And unfortunately, it happens more often than I would like. But there's one individual that, we'd had all kinds of coaching and conversations leading up to, and it just wasn't culturally a good fit. It's probably the best way to put it. And there were some things that they weren't willing or able to express at the time, but then 6 months later, they had kind of described to us what a relief it was that we had made that decision because they weren't going to make that on their own. In fact, they had lost a considerable amount of weight and got much healthier after the difficult conversation and us having to move in that direction. And so, it is important to have these conversations, no matter how hard they could be, because the ultimate outcome is probably going to be better for everyone in the long run if you have them. It may not feel that way going into it, but hopefully some of the guidance that we're able to talk through here will help you all kind of see ways to do that.
Yeah, let's well, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
But yeah, I was going to say, so as we kind of navigate through today, we're going to take a couple of moments and probably throw folks into breakout rooms if we get time. And the goal really is to allow you all to sort of role play and think through, after we get through some of the content, how to approach one of these difficult conversations. And so what we're asking is for everybody to kind of just take a quick moment, think of one that you need to have, and kind of write that down. Write down who it is, why you have to have that conversation, and maybe just what your initial thoughts are. And I encourage you as we kind of move through some of the content here to think about that situation in particular and how you're going to apply some of these concepts to that approach.
It looks like a lot of you have come with, this is the one I want to focus on. So that's great. We want this to be useful for you in that way. Give you a couple minutes to just take a couple notes.
You all can imagine the Jeopardy theme song playing in the background right now to get you through your thoughts.
Careful, I'll start singing. No. No. I'm thinking of the difficult conversation I have ahead of me tomorrow. Yeah. So let's lean in just a little bit more before we get into how to have the conversations, why it is easy to talk yourself out of them, right? We talk about delaying and all these different kinds of reasons. Oh, it's going to hurt the relationship, or oh, I don't want to make waves, or oh, I don't. And those may be absolutely true, and they may be ways for you to kind of duck behind not having the conversation and getting yourself out of it. That tendency or that kind of natural desire to not talk is actually pretty rational. This comes out of the Amy Edmondson's work on the fearless organization. When you think about having a difficult conversation, who benefits? Well, the relationship, hopefully, and the work. Things do get better in that way. When does that benefit occur? Later, right? After a little delay. How certain are you of that benefit? Not super high, right? Hopefully the skills we're going to talk about today are going to increase that for you, but it's certainly not a guarantee. Compare that to the proposition, I'll just not have the conversation. I'll just stay silent, right? Who does that benefit? Me. When do I get that benefit? Oh yeah, right now. How certain am I of that benefit? 100%. It feels good to kind of let yourself off the hook from a conversation and to talk yourself out of it. So if you find yourself coming up with those reasons to not have a difficult conversation, really push yourself, really challenge yourself. Am I just kind of ducking an uncertain outcome and a difficult road to get to it? Or are those real things that I have to be considering here? I don't want to discount the reality of situations, but I know my tendency is to find excuses, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in that, right? Why should you have the conversation anyway? The outcome matters, right? Even if it's not guaranteed that you're going to have a benefit to the relationship or the work, it's worth fighting for that because you want to make things better. Improvement is possible and worth working toward. Additionally, there's likely a negative impact if you don't have the conversation, right? Not saying something is tacit permission. So if an employee is behaving in a way that doesn't work for you or is not meeting performance goals, as someone mentioned, or, whatever it is that you need to have the difficult conversation about, saying nothing is a lot like saying you're okay, right? If you're not objecting to it, you're not making your expectations clear, you're not communicating to them, they're going to keep doing it, right? Why wouldn't they? Additionally, you really want to be part of a culture that can have constructive, healthy, productive conflict, right? I'm not talking about fistfights. I'm not talking about hollering. I'm talking about exchanges of opinion, of position, of ideas that are, in conflict with each other, but that you talk through and you work out. Think about the relationships in your life, the people that you can disagree with and the people that you cannot disagree with. I'm going to bet that on the whole, the places where you can disagree are higher quality relationships and you get more out of them. Let's make your work environment have that same kind of benefit so that you can use your voice and bring your opinion forward when things are not going exactly as you'd like. Jump in at any point if you have questions or type it in the chat, whatever. We do want to kind of hear from you as we're going forward. Okay, so let's get down to actually having a difficult conversation. And Jeff and I broke this down into 3 phases. First, there's the preparation for the conversation. Then there's the actual conversation itself. And then there's the follow-up, right? And attending to the relationship. And we want to put emphasis on all 3 of those phases. We tend to only think about the actual kind of discourse with the other person when, setting up for that and then following up after are also really important. So let's talk about preparation. First thing is to clarify your objective. Why are you having the conversation? And this is another got to be honest with yourself kind of moments, right? There's been plenty of times when I'm angry with someone and I want to tell them that. And I want them to say, I'm wrong and I'm sorry and you're right and those kinds of things. That's not the right motivation to engage in a conversation if you're cloaking it as feedback or helpful or disciplinary or something like that, right? You got to check your own potential biases in it. The conversation should not be about blame or about you being right. The aim should be resetting for a better path going forward. So it's on you as the initiator of the conversation to check your own motives going in and make sure that you're really on a path toward making things better and that there's not anything else that you're looking for to come out of it. Then you want to get really curious about what's happening with the issue you want to raise. We tend to go straight to the person, right? Oh, that Jeff, you know how he is, and it's always his fault, and he does these things, right? It's called the fundamental attribution error. It's a biggie in social psychology. I'm not going to bore you, but we all do it. So what we want to encourage you to do when you're exploring the issue is really focus on the situation and the behaviors. What could be causing this? What might be happening in that person's world? What organizational resources or systems could be contributing to what's going on? Get really curious about what's happening. It's not about changing the person, right? It's about addressing the situation that's happening. And so then you got to look at all the possible contributors to that. And then the classic question, I learned this from Peter Block's work, right, is to ask yourself, what am I doing to contribute to this situation? It's likely if there's a difficulty between 2 people, if you're talking about interactions between the 2 of you, both parties have some ownership of what's going on. And you want to take responsibility for your part. And so again, you got to look at yourself, the hard questions, and say, what am I doing to contribute to the problem here? what could I do differently? What could I offer in this difficult conversation of what I can do differently to resolve the situation? And then finally, it's actually really helpful until you're really, really good at this. And that takes a lot of practice. I'll tell you if I ever get there. Script the actual language you're going to use, right? You don't want to sound stilted or rehearsed when you're talking to someone. You need to be real and in the moment. But if you've actually thought through the words you're going to use, it'll be much easier to enter the conversation. You'll probably not say the words exactly as you wrote them. You shouldn't. It's not a script to memorize. It's just working through exactly how you want to lay out what you want to say, right? So that you're not hunting and pecking and in the moment being unclear for the person. Because our friend Brene Brown teaches us what? Clear is kind. We talk about in feedback conversations, you hear about the positive sandwich, right? A positive and then a negative and then a positive. That's really taking care of the feedback giver much more than the feedback receiver, right? Makes it easier for us to give. But what's the receiver focusing on? They're focusing on the negative piece. If you have something to deliver that's difficult, say it clearly. They deserve that from you. Don't dance around. Don't hide it behind things. Don't dress it up like it's prettier than it is. Say it clearly. State it in a declarative manner. And then ask questions and get curious, right? You don't have all the answers, but you want to lay out the issue with great clarity. Questions or comments on the preparation phase? Go ahead, Jeff.
To kind of wrap up the slide, when you're clarifying your objective, if you're able to make that clear.
Wait, Jeff, I'm having trouble hearing Jeff. Is anybody else? Can you guys hear him okay? No, we're having trouble.
Having trouble.
Is that better?
A little bit. Just maybe talk a little louder.
Uh-oh. 1 second.
I don't know what happened.
My speakers are good. Is this any better? Okay. So I guess what I was trying to suggest is that when you're thinking through the language that you're going to want to use, and in order to stay clear and kind, make sure that you really clarify that objective. What is the one goal you're trying to walk away from? Because the reality is the conversation is going to change. No matter how you play it out in your head, I've not had a single conversation go the way that I thought it would. There were folks that I thought would take things very poorly, and they took it very positively. And there were folks that I thought I was giving good feedback to, and turns out it wasn't for some reason. So, but if you're able to make sure that at the end, everybody understands sort of what that objective was and what that goal was, then you're going to be headed into a good conversation, whether you realize it or not.
Should I walk through an example on this, or are we good on? I'll try to do it quickly, just so you can get a feel for how we push through it. I have a conversation tomorrow. I have a consulting firm where I founded with 2 partners. They let me work like 5 hours a week, and they do it full time. So I'm the luckiest person on earth. But one of my partners, one of the co-founders, is leaving. So we've had this big, like drawn out negotiation of her buyout and all the like big terms of it. And we've had a meeting of the minds. It was difficult, but we handled the negotiations. But now we're getting into the nitty gritty of like, when does her email account go away? And what files will she have access to? And what is she going to tell our clients who she might want to sell her new business to that she's going to be starting up? So we're getting into the really particulars of it. So when I talk about clarifying my objective for that, I'm kind of mad at her and I'm a little bit resentful that she's going to capitalize on existing relationships from our firm to build her new firm. But I have to sort of clear through the weeds of that. My objective is to protect our company and to try to set up her for success in her business. I do want that for her. And we've committed that to her. So I have to get out of, do I feel good about her behavior? Do I like what she's done? Do I think she's going to steal clients, this, that, and the other? And I have to get into what's right for our company and what's going to be right for hers going forward in the future. So when I think about issues that I want to raise, I'm in the second box now, right? Focusing on situations, behaviors, and issues. I want to go back to, oh, that time when she was charging things to the company that I didn't think she should be charging. So she's always going to take stuff and she's going to write everything to. That's a lot of attribution. That's a lot about her as a person. I got to just focus on her communicating with clients. What are those words going to be? How are we going to figure out that message? Her use of emails. What can she have access to? What can't she have access to, and why? What's protecting my company and what's protecting her company, right? Really down to those specific behaviors instead of harboring stuff from the past that's been bugging me. And then I have to say, what am I doing to contribute to the problem? I really have to watch my bias because I have one. It's been 12 years. We've done a lot of good stuff. I got some baggage around this person, you know? And so I have to be really careful with that. I've told the two other people that are involved in the negotiation, watch me. Send up a flare when I'm getting too hard on her or when I'm being unfair, right? Because all of that can crank up the conflict in a negative way instead of keeping it focused on the task. And literally the three of us who will stay in the company, and she's leaving, another person came on in the meantime, are drafting the emails we'll send her and passing them by each other and editing each other's ideas, right? So the person we're dealing with doesn't like direct confrontation. She likes to have something in writing and then go away and think about it and then come back. And so we have to kind of work with that, but we still have to be clear and direct in what we're saying, right? I hope that's helpful, just talking it through about how we're going to approach the conversation with her tomorrow about all those nitty-gritties. So let's move on to phase 2.
This is sometimes the fun part, right? Where you get to actually have the difficult conversation. Besides just having the conversation itself, you have to think through, as the person who's initiating, ways to really create that psychological safety. I think I just saw someone in the chat say that, they're more likely to be the person that someone is upset with. And you don't want to make excuses. And while you may feel that way, it's important to make sure that everyone feels safe in speaking to their truth. What is it? Asking those questions, figuring out why that behavior you're exhibiting may be upsetting somebody, and offering that input can be really valuable. I've ascribed to sort of the 2-to-1 ratio rule. I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I should probably listen just as much as I speak. And so when you are trying to have the conversation, you have to be willing to hear what they are saying and actually react to that as you're engaging in it. Because you may learn along the way that someone may have something going on entirely removed from the workplace that may be fueling why they're doing something at the office. And then that could lead to a better conversation and dialogue around how their actions are affecting you, and then lead you hopefully toward a pathway to address that together. Or, maybe the next time that they say, yell at you or whatever that is, if you understand that there may be something else causing that, you have that opportunity in that moment to kind of just, hey, what's really going on here? Are you mad at me, or is there something else that, you just need to get off your chest to help? A lot of the times, just acknowledging that you're not having fun in the conversation too, I think can help as well. So that folks don't think that, you're just there to just hammer on them. Sometimes you can get that sort of vibe or bias. The last session that we had was really focused on emotional intelligence, and that really is critical when it comes to a difficult conversation. If you know that there are certain things that are going to set you off, certain things that are going to make you go down a path, you have to be willing to acknowledge that and ask to just take a moment to step aside or to revisit the conversation, or it's not going the way that, you need it to, and you need a second to breathe to sort of de-escalate or whatever that might be. Because really the goal at the end of the day is to improve the organization and the relationship that you have. And then finally, don't delay. Really, so there's a book that I've pulled a number of these things from called Fierce Conversations, and really the focus of that is just have the conversation. You can't put it off. I like to think of it as like a stone in your shoe. Are you going to take it out, or are you going to keep walking around and limping? And that's a lot of the times how these conversations can go. If you just continue to let it fester, things are going to get worse. And at the end of the conversation, you don't have to have a change, but you've got to have the conversation to better understand each other to move forward. Monica asked just sort of about explaining decreases in work performance, and I agree that that isn't easy. So an example that I would have, I had an employee that the performance would go up and down all the time, and I could never figure out why. And so one day I just called them into my office and I explained to them, hey, you missed this critical assignment, and because of that, somebody's having this other issue happen. What's going on? And I just paused. I gave it 7 seconds, and in that 7 seconds, they started to go into detail about a lot of things going on at home, a lot of distractions with they had a kid that was going to a new preschool, and there was some things going on with other kids at the preschool biting and fighting and all that stuff, the stuff that as parents we kind of get to know and enjoy when we send our kids somewhere else. And so we were able to then have a conversation both about the performance, but then how can we set up parameters so when these things are going on, I'm aware so I can know to help you. And so, looking at it from my perspective, what could I do to make your situation better? Is that a little bit more of a flexible work schedule on certain days so that, you have the time to get your kid to and from the preschool? Or is it allowing you to work different hours or come in on a Saturday so this stuff gets done and then you're able to leave a few hours early each day? Looking for ways to improve how we approach these things to make sure that the work gets done ultimately. Um, and it's not an easy conversation, but if you treat the person with dignity and really listen to what they're saying as to why, especially if it is something as simple as, missing a document that they shouldn't have missed, usually you can figure out what's really going on and help them along the way. Now, it's not always going to be like that. Sometimes there are going to be situations where the person just says, hey, I didn't want to. And that maybe speaks to a bigger conversation that you need to have and a different conversation. Um, but really, I think the important part is you have to be willing to jump in and have it.
I love that you're emphasizing curiosity and listening, right? It's called difficult conversations, not difficult speeches. And so that means that you really do want to elicit that two-way conversation. Monica, your point about getting too personal, you can ask permission or you can just say that. I don't want to intrude on your personal life. I'm looking to see if there's a way we can work this out. Talk about what you're comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
Again, don't use that as a reason not to talk. Address it and say your intentions explicitly. Great.
And
So you've had the go, Jeff.
well, I was just going to say, and on that note, maybe a different example I can use. I had an employee that was missing deadlines repeatedly, and I wasn't quite sure why. And in the conversation, it was disclosed to me that this individual had had cancer several years ago, was in remission, but um, they had what was called cancer brain. And I had never heard of that concept, but essentially it was just fogginess that would come or go. And where our solution landed was as we kind of realized where some of the timelines were being missed, it was let's set calendar reminders. Every time that there's a new deadline that gets assigned to you, immediately put it on your calendar. And that was a tool that really helped them to sort of take ownership and also make them feel a little more empowered about how they could address their own performance because they didn't want to miss the deadlines. It was just, because of some of their medical issues they had been dealing with, it was difficult for them to recognize that they had missed the email or the deadline or whatever that was. And so I think maybe on the slide before, when we were talking about exploring, it's really exploring and trying to find ways to have solutions to the conversation so that you guys can all come together and come out at the end with a positive outcome.
Joey's comment in the chat is also really interesting about what do you say when there's something, when you notice the change in performance, but you don't want to dump on anyone, including yourself, or you don't want to disclose personal stuff in your life.
Yeah, that can be challenging. And that's going to depend on the relationship that you have with that supervisor. But there probably are certain things that they should be aware of if it is going to affect your performance. Because the last thing that you would want is to start to have that sort of vicious cycle of, your performance suffers, and then that leads to another issue, and then that leads to another issue. If, maybe if the performance is suffering is, you just needed an extra 20 minutes, 30 minutes, different way of approaching it, whatever that might be. Maybe help because maybe tactically you're not as good as Excel as maybe one of your peers, and you're better at making things in InDesign than your peer is. And so if your supervisor is open and listening, they might find a way to better deploy the whole team to make the whole team more effective too.
If your performance is suffering, it's not likely news to your supervisor or your manager. And so they would rather hear that you're aware of it and you're trying to do something about it, even if you don't want to give them every last detail, or are still working on it, or still working with the person who might be the root cause of what's going on. But saying, I am aware of this, I am working on it, I want us to stay in contact on it, is a lot. They're going to want to hear that from you. Yeah.
And sometimes your performance is suffering because you're not having that conversation with a peer. I know I've been in that boat before where I see days where I didn't want to put forward my best effort because I felt like a peer was getting different treatment. And finally, at some point, I had that conversation with my boss, and it really helped to enlighten me on things that I was unaware of. And it's hard to have that conversation with your boss because it puts you in a sense of vulnerability, especially if you don't know how it's going to be reciprocated or not.
The other part that goes with what Jeff said about don't delay or dawdle is don't let a pattern of behavior accumulate so that you're having to say, for the last 6 months, you've been late every week, right? Why did you let 6 months go before you had a conversation with them about it, right? So get in there earlier, again, as we said before, to make your expectations explicit, but also so that they're not going to hear later about you've been harboring this thing for all this time, right? And kind of holding it over their head without them knowing it. So get in early on a single behavior so that you don't have to speak to a whole series of things. Okay, so you've had the difficult conversation, and some things went exactly as you planned and some things didn't, because that's how it always is, right? But you stayed in it and were present and were curious and listening and trying to be creative and coming up with solutions. And so then after some time has passed, and how much time kind of depends on the situation and the relationship as well, but sooner than you think, right? Follow back up and check in, right? Reiterate the importance of the relationship to you. I know we had a tough conversation. I want to check in and let you know I appreciate you as a colleague, whatever the right words are for the situation. Have you had any other thoughts about it that we should talk about? Is there anything else that you wanted to address on that? I just want to reiterate that I enjoy having you as a colleague. I feel good about the direction we're going, right? Putting the positive spin on it, if in fact that's where the conversation landed. And you don't want to pick a scab or just keep opening it up. But one follow-up check-in that says, has anything else surfaced on this for you, is fair. And because it may have. And you want to keep a dialogue going, right? It would be unusual to cover every single thing about an issue in one conversation. So keep it open as a conversation. It's also, your responsibility as the initiator of trying to make things better and create positive change to explore what caused the original situation, right? Is it organization level or system level factors that need to be adjusted? If if the people in the group are not good at Excel and nobody's providing any Excel training, that's a problem, right? They're not going to just go get it on their own. You want to ask yourself what steps you can take to prevent this from happening for someone else in the future. If you hire the next person, are they going to have the same problem as this last person did? Or is there a personality in the mix that's going to create a situation for everyone that they come into contact? Whatever it is, you got to think about what besides that individual person was involved in making the situation happen. And again, what was your role in contributing and what might you need to change? Then another factor to think about that Jeff brought into our work here that's really important is if the conversation was on someone else's behalf, right? One of the people on my team asked me to let you know that they're really uncomfortable when you do this or something like that, right? You're protecting someone's anonymity, or they heard you talking to a customer in a way that's really inappropriate and they want to let you know, whatever it is, right? Be careful with that follow-up. You want to maintain the confidentiality or anonymity of the other party involved. You're still representing them and still need to protect that for them. You're constantly trying to balance confidentiality and transparency. You want to tell them what's being done. You want to see if there's a way to forge a direct relationship with the other person involved. There may not be, in which case you have to just, hold that line firm. There may be, in which case you can be more open and direct with the other person. But a conversation is not always going to be about what's affecting you directly. You might be representing someone else. And so you need to protect them in that situation.
Yeah, and to build on that a little bit too, sometimes you get stuck in an awkward situation where two employees did not have a very productive conversation. And so that leads to disciplinary action. And it may be just for one employee or maybe for both. And I've had employees ask me, did you discipline them? And, I usually tell them the same thing, which is that I value confidentiality and whether or not they were disciplined isn't the issue here. The issue is how we're going to make this relationship better. And so it's understanding that I could be transparent and I could outline, they were suspended for a week or whatever it might be. But you would hope that if you're going to build on a better future together, you have to trust that you're all going to be in it together. And that's the goal there when you're balancing that confidentiality and transparency.
None of these difficult conversations are one-offs, right? You're going to be around the person usually and deal with them. And yeah, absolutely. It's a complicated context. Questions or comments about those three phases, how they work together to try to support a productive conversation? Any comments or questions on those? Because you know what's coming next. We're going to ask you to work on one.
The difficult conversation comes next, right?
Yes. We're going to have the difficult conversation that invites you to work on the conversation that you have upcoming, right? Let's make this useful and practice what we're doing. So we want to ask you to reflect on the conversation you identified earlier, right? That hasn't happened yet. Go into the breakout room you're invited into. Christy's going to send out invitations to breakout rooms. And really practice that conversation with the others in the room, all three phases. What are the key points of prep? What are the key things you want to have happen in the conversation and in the follow-up? And practice just your opener or whatever you think is going to be a challenging part of the conversation, but actually deliver some of it. And then listeners, you can see how that person felt saying that. You can tell them how they felt hearing it, or give them some reactions. Clear on what we're asking you to do? I think you're just going to be, Christy, are we three in a room? And we're going to give you breakout rooms. Probably didn't have enough time to talk through everything, but we wanted to just hear some of what you did come across. Any insights you want to offer? Any questions that came up? How was it? Did you get to practice?
I enjoyed my session. I actually was with Donna. We talked about the prep stages and how we would prepare. It's hard to come up with an opening that quick, impromptu in 8 minutes. So we did talk through the steps and just really, I mean, talk about like what was most important to us. The prep stage, obviously, but what I really found value with was the follow-up stage, right? The phase 3. You know, if that relationship really means something, it's imperative to follow up because the difficult conversations can impact people in so many ways. And that follow up is very important. It gives yourself credibility, right? And it shows that you actually care and are open to continue the conversation. So we just kind of talked about that, just really kind of dug into that, but definitely valuable.
Nice, nice. Who has one that they want some help with or want to talk through a little bit? You're all masters at this point. We don't need any more help. Leave us alone.
I just have a general question that we were talking through, which I think I know what your answers are going to be, but I figured since you're here, we'll ask you. So I have 2 employees that I need to have a difficult conversation with, and it's about the same issue. Would you suggest I talk to them separately or together?
The same issue, meaning they're exhibiting the same behavior, or in what way is it the same issue? Yeah, I agree with Monica. My first thing is separate.
It's about their work, a project that we're all working on together.
I mean, my gut is to say talk to them separately because it's a private conversation. If you're talking to
Okay.
someone about their work behavior.
Okay, that's what I figured you'd say, but I just thought I'd check. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's worth your time. I mean, it might feel more efficient to group it, but I think they're gonna have a much easier time speaking with you one-on-one than with their peer next to them.
Thank you.
Be great to say that the second conversation will be that much easier, but as we know, they all go different ways. So
Maybe your opening line would be the same for both, but at that point, what else? What feels really comfortable about this kind of approach, and where do you still want to ask questions or want to work through situations?
I mean, we didn't really get to the dialogue stage of our conversation. It was more of the ramp up of getting the confidence to have the conversation, and I think that's the biggest hurdle, as you guys stated, is being able to come to yourself, and whether it's you related or the other person, and just being ready to rip off the Band-Aid or to jump in. And that's what we talked about, was kind of just giving the confidence that, you know, as Jeff said, you know, it starts off rough, but then hopefully you've developed trust and a relationship with the person that you can be honest and they see that vulnerability and they respect it instead of seeing it as a slight to them or to whomever you're working with.
And I think that one of the advantages, and I like your phase 1 preparation, and preparation for those meetings are so important because when you go into the meeting, like the 2 employees that have performance issues, that example, right away, somebody's going to say, well, Joey did this and Sally did that, and I'm not as bad as, and what are you going to do about this? And I think by having like some notes to help you stay on track is a huge like way to be successful. I think going in, having it in your head and winging it, employees, especially in those employee conversations, they can get you off track and then your meeting can't be successful.
So let's imagine you're giving me some feedback about coming in late. It's not the first time I came in late, and we had an important visitor in the office and I was 10 minutes late. And you say to me, I want to talk about the fact that you were late. You knew it was an important thing. What was going on? And I say, oh, it's all Sally's fault. She caught me at the entrance and wouldn't stop talking. I couldn't get her to shut up. I swear, she just went on and on and on. It's not my fault. It's Sally's fault. What do you say back to me? How do you get me back on track? Anyone can answer for Donna. Take her off the hot seat.
I'm not afraid to answer, but I'd
Good.
like to hear what other people say.
Well, what would you say, Donna?
What would I say? I would say, I understand XYZ is very chatty, but it wasn't their responsibility for you to make that impression to the people in that room. And when you chose to not be there on time, that made a poor impression on you and on the team. So because, when you win, the team wins. When the team wins, you win. And when, by you not fulfilling your responsibility to be on time, that was on you and not on Sally or whoever you were talking to. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's clear. You're holding me accountable for my behavior.
It was your responsibility.
Love that. It was very straightforward. I will say that. And I think some people do struggle with just being very direct. But there's no need to dance around the issue. I think transparency is key.
What you don't want to do in that situation is say, well, should I go talk to Sally about it? Or why don't you use the back door next time so you don't hit, I shouldn't keep saying the name Sally, that's not fair, XYZ. So you don't have to pass XYZ on your way to work. But don't engage, don't get involved, don't follow down that path, right? You're going to stay just like Donna did, strictly on that behavior. If they want to get into problem solving, right? If, well, actually XYZ stops me every single time I come in the door and it's really kind of making me late every day. What do I do? Then you can start problem solving. But the immediate conversation is about the fact that they were late on that important day and you want to stay focused on that. Yeah.
And then you can give them some other coaching advice because they might say, well, when she catches me at the reception desk, I just don't have a good way. I don't know how to get out of those conversations. That's the problem solving, which phase 2, I guess, where you can help her with strategies.
Yes.
How to exit a meeting.
That person has to have a difficult conversation. There's 3 phases. Right?
Yeah.
Going off of Donna, I've had quite a few my main supervisor now, who when she recognizes a flaw in my work, she tends to transform it into that. If she sees I'm struggling with, right now it's journalism writing, long form writing, and she brings it up and she says, hey, I know you've displayed this as something that you want to work on. And she sent me 3 seminars that I could sign up for during work hours, that I could take time out to get some of that coaching, which was, it made it feel less of a, hey, you're really bad at this, and more of a, hey, I want to see you succeed in this, which was very nice. Haven't gotten much better yet.
Have you had the opportunity to let her know that that was helpful?
Yes, I let her know very much that I appreciate that way of encouragement instead of just saying I am not good at something.
I actually had a kind of a similar situation where I had to talk to not a subordinate, but someone that's a lower level than me, and which I was basically told by my higher ups that I was expected to take more responsibility and more front-facing actions, and but I made sure I pulled this other person aside and had the conversation with them before, so that I didn't just look like I was going in there and stepping on their toes. But when we got in there, I made sure I phrased the situations like, I know that you're also looking to be promoted to the next level. It's a very difficult process, and if there's any way I can help you, please let me know. And this is what I was thinking and how we could get you promoted as well. So kind of preface some bad news with some, with a solution as well. I know, but said not to do that.
I love that. In conflict resolution terms, you're talking about positions and interest, right? The position is, well, I want to be the one talking. No, I want to be the one talking out front. But the interests are, you know, you've been asked to take a bigger lead in the project and that person wants to get promoted. When you work at the interest level, there might be ways to accomplish both of those things completely, right? You can put them forward in other ways and make other things happen to try to advance their career, and they can yield the spotlight for this moment where you've been asked to step ahead, you know? So getting into the why are they asking for what they want? Why are you asserting what you want? What's underneath it can really help with that. I love that, Matt. Good job. Other situations? Maybe it's time for us to start kind of wrapping. Let me get to the last slides here. Yeah, right. I wanted to give a brief note about, you guys are seeing the Adam Grant slide now? Yeah, okay. So I wanted to just make a brief note about being on the receiving end of a difficult conversation. When somebody comes to you and says, I want to talk about this aspect of your work or your behavior or our relationship or whatever it is. Adam Grant, who's a best-selling author, psychologist at UPenn, I think offered some useful perspective here, saying a mark of emotional maturity is hearing disagreement without taking offense. Thoughtful dissent doesn't always mean you're wrong. It often means the issue is complex and your knowledge is incomplete. Good faith debate is not an attack. It's an opportunity to sharpen your ideas, right? So if you are, if somebody's having a difficult conversation with you, or if in the exchange, in a difficult conversation, you initiate some feedback comes back your way, or a disagreement gets directed toward you, keep in mind, does not need to take it personally, and you want to be able to talk those things through. That's that healthy conflict culture that we talked about at the beginning, right? So letting your defenses fall just a little if you can, enough to see over the fence and have a constructive conversation, is going to make it more productive on both sides.
Right. So something fun I always like to do to wrap up conversations like these is what I call insight in action. And so I'm going to ask everybody to take a quick second, and if you're in the chat, write down either one new insight from today or one action you're going to take as a result of this discussion. If you're on the phone and can't chat, you can feel free to share that verbally if you would like.
I'd just like to add that I plan to use all three phases. I currently pretty much do at this time. I love writing down in the prep phase of what needs to be addressed. I find that very helpful, and I also keep track of the conversation so that going forward with follow-ups, I can easily recall and address it again just to make sure things have improved. So I think this has all been very helpful for me.
Love that.
Thank you for suggesting.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you for suggesting that there be an objective for the conversations.
Really important to check. I mean, maybe it's just me, but oftentimes I've got an ulterior motive that I haven't even thought about, and I really got to push myself to be clear on what I want to have happen. Some great comments in the chat about, like, just do it, like have the conversation, like Jeff's encouraging us, don't dawdle, just get in there and do it. They need to hear it sooner rather than later, and it'll feel better for you too. Love the point about scripting to prepare and active listening. Jordan, that's such an important comment. You want to go into the conversation ready to listen.
Well, that's a new turn of phrase that I just learned. A swoop
Haven't
and
heard it
swoop
either.
meeting. So, yeah.
Thank you,
So
Donna.
for anybody that's in management, make sure you take good use of that phrase, because that's typically when a problem comes to HR, and that's not how you should do HR, or how you should do management. So
That's Denise's big takeaway from the session. Good job, Donna. You guys crack me up. Nice. One more action, one more insight. Shane, you were gonna say something at some point. Did you get to jump in?
No, I'm okay. No, I'm okay.
I have something to add, something else I wanted to mention. When someone's on the receiving end, I think it's important for the person to communicate, especially direct reports to their managers, so that they are aware of what's going on, which could help them with any issues that they need help with. I have a direct report that sometimes it's like she's not working, work isn't being moved or touched, and it seems like she's maybe offline for a while, and I've asked her to, just communicate if something's going on rather than not say anything. It just helps me as far as working with that particular person so that we can work together. Perhaps she needs coverage, someone to cover while she's out, or if she has to go to the school or something like that. So I just think communication is key.
Terrific. Absolutely. We got clear as kind again in the chat. I really love what you said, Monica, about admit when I need help in any one of the phases, or just in your own performance situation, whatever it is. It's such a big part of effective leadership. Good for you.
Are Jeff and there we go. Never mind. Sorry.
I'm just going to share one last thought. The conversations themselves don't get easier, but you can get better at them, if that makes sense. That sort of oxymoron of a statement, that just the more you do it and the more that you actually just jump right in, the better you will get at having them. But there's still not going to be easy conversations. That's maybe inherent in the name.
And it's the model holds up in all domains of your life. So you can practice in lower stakes places than your workplace if you want to, just kind of thinking through, checking yourself on your motives, preparing, exploring the problem. All those kinds of things will help you in conversations with your family or your friends or whatever it is. Yeah.
I just put that in the conversation earlier. I just had a conversation with my brother and sister today. We have an aging mother, and there's 13 of us siblings, and we need everybody singing on the same sheet of music.
Yeah.
And so we need to have a family meeting, and I am going to apply this to the family meeting.
I think that's great. Clear is kind. Good luck with all of that. That's a tough situation. Okay, I think with that, yeah, Jeff, I think we're going to wrap up and say thank you for your great engagement. We were really hoping there would be some rich conversation, and y'all brought it. So it helps a lot to bring the stuff to life. Thank you so much. Please come find us on LinkedIn. Happy to be contacted by email as well. Some of you already know how to track me down, and that's great. But we're both happy to speak with you more on this topic or any other.
Yes, and on behalf of the Alumni Association and Young Alumni, I want to say thank you to both of you for your wonderful presentation. Everyone, you will receive an electronic copy of the presentation, so you don't have to worry about taking down all the notes just yet. And as we end tonight, we'd love to invite you to join us again for future events. This Friday, alumni will gather for a watch party to cheer on the NKU men's basketball team as they take on Wright State and Dayton. Join us at Barleycorns, the brew house, beginning at 6 p.m. for discounted appetizers and pints with your fellow Norris fans. Then join us for the next installment of the Professional Development Series on April 16th as we discuss managing change in your organization, which I'm sure a lot of us are going through. I'm also going to add in the alumni link so that you can bookmark it or do whatever to keep up on some of these events. So I just put that in the chat. It's a pretty easy URL. It's just nku.edu/alumni. And I just want to say thank you again for everyone who's participated in these events. I know Alumni Association and everyone else who's involved has worked very hard to put them on, and I find them extremely useful for my day-to-day. So I also want to say thank you to our presenters for all your amazing advice.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.